I never thought betrayal would wear my brother's smile. One night, over coffee and trust, I showed him my rescue AI, a system I'd spent 2 years building in stolen hours. He called it brilliant, said he was proud. A month later, I watched him on live television, accepting an award for his groundbreaking work. My name wasn't mentioned once. At home, my parents beamed, telling me I should be happy for him. But they didn't see the blockchain watermark in his demo video. I did. And in that moment, I knew my silence was over. But not in the way they'd expect. When my parents converted the spare bedroom into Ethan's creative studio, they called it an investment in the family's future. A sleek desk, soundproof panels, a professional mic. Everything he needed to record his true crime podcast. I was told to be happy for him while I balanced shifts at the campus cafe, to save for a second-hand laptop. They said a girl didn't need all that gear to succeed. Talent would find its way. Apparently, my talent needed to work for rent first. Ethan was the golden boy. Born with it, they said. He could talk his way through any situation, charm anyone in a room. I was the hard-working one, the steady hand, who lacked the big vision. My victories were nice, his were destined. I learned to smile at the imbalance, to keep my head down. But keeping my head down meant I saw things others didn't. One night I was at the kitchen table, adjusting the final lines of code for my rescue AI prototype. Ethan wandered in with a mug of coffee and a lazy grin. "What's this?" he asked, leaning over my shoulder. I hesitated. Sharing my work was something I did sparingly. Too many classmates had repackaged my ideas before. But he was my brother. "It's just a side project," I said. "I'm still working out the kinks." He studied the interface, scrolling through my notes. "It's brilliant," he said, voice warm with approval. "You should keep this under wraps. Total secrecy. Let me take a closer look. Maybe I can give some pointers." It felt good, dangerously good to hear him say that. I slid my laptop toward him. He flipped through a few tabs, then handed it back. I didn't notice his phone angled toward the screen until later, when the reflection in the window betrayed him. A week passed before the next crack appeared. I was coming down the stairs when I heard my parents talking in the living room, voices low but urgent. "Ethan just has a better image," my mother said. "Investors like him. He's charismatic, photogenic. Lena's bright, but she's not marketable." "She'll understand," my father replied. "It's for the family." I stood frozen on the landing, my hand gripping the railing. I had been naive enough to believe the competition between us was unspoken, an undercurrent we both ignored. Now I understood. It wasn't a competition at all. It was a casting choice, and I hadn't even been called to audition. Later that day, I sat at my desk, staring at an email I wasn't supposed to see. It had been left open on the shared family computer. "Thank you for your innovative proposal," the message began. "We are excited to explore funding opportunities for your disaster response AI system." The email was addressed to Ethan, but the language, down to the phrasing of dynamic acoustic mapping and real-time distress signal detection, was mine. Word for word from the grant application draft I'd written 2 months earlier. I scrolled down. Attached was a PDF of the proposal, branded with Ethan's name and a stylized logo I'd never seen. My name was nowhere. The submission date was a week after I'd shown him my prototype. For a moment, I wanted to believe there had been a mistake. Maybe he had referenced my work without realizing how much he'd taken. Maybe he'd planned to credit me later. That fragile hope lasted exactly 3 minutes, long enough for me to imagine calling him and asking, "Why?" My hand hovered over my phone, my thumb on his contact, But then something in me shifted. I saw, in my mind's eye, the look he'd give me. Half pity, half irritation, as he explained why this was for the best. I heard the way my parents would side with him, urging me not to overreact. I put the phone down, deleted the draft message. My pulse slowed, my breathing evened. The sting of betrayal settled into something colder, sharper. They thought I would explode, give them a scene, prove myself emotional and unreasonable. Instead, I closed my laptop and reached for a fresh notebook. If they were going to turn my work into their family investment, I'd make sure there was a ledger. Quiet, meticulous, undeniable. I wasn't going to fight them on their terms. I was going to make them walk straight into mine. The night after I found the email, I sat in my tiny dorm room with the blinds drawn, my laptop humming on the desk. I stripped the code bare, line by line, until the rescue AI was a skeleton. Then I began rebuilding it, not to improve efficiency, not for elegance, but to hide a new feature so deeply inside the system that anyone who tried to claim it would leave fingerprints. A hidden verification algorithm, something only I would know how to trigger. Once it was in place, I recorded the timestamp on the blockchain, an immutable witness to my work. By day, I poured myself into side gigs, debugging buggy Python scripts for other students, fixing laptops in the student lounge, even soldering circuit boards for a local hobbyist group. The money wasn't much, but it was mine. No one could threaten to take it away. I kept a small jar in my desk drawer, labeled Freedom, where every crumpled bill and coin went until I had enough to buy the server space I needed. Sometimes the tension knotted so tightly in my chest that I thought it might split me in two. That's when I'd climb the fire escape to the roof, guitar slung over my shoulder. The skyline hummed in the distance, and I'd sit cross-legged, strumming old chords until the noise in my head quieted. Music was my one sanctuary, the one thing Ethan had never touched. The air up there was sharp, and for a few minutes I could almost believe none of this was happening. It was after one of those rooftop nights that Ethan texted me. "Come to my launch party this Friday. Got something I think you'll like." I nearly deleted the message, but curiosity and caution are strange bedfellows. I showed up, blending into the back of the crowded room. Ethan was on stage, easy grin in place, wearing a dark hoodie with a minimalist logo stamped over the chest, an angular cicada I had designed 2 years ago for my prototype. My heart thudded so hard I thought people might hear it. The crowd clapped and cheered as he unveiled his disaster response AI. Every slide felt like a ghost of my own work, stripped of context, dressed in buzzwords. I stayed until the end, smiling just enough for the cameras. Back home, the strain began to take its toll. I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed lines of code instead of dreams. I missed 2 assignment deadlines, then 3. My professors stopped making eye contact. Friends I'd once confided in drifted away, their messages drying up. The whispers followed me. Jealousy, pettiness, a chip on my shoulder. No one wanted to stand next to the girl accused of envying her successful brother. Then Ethan released a behind-the-scenes video on his channel. It was slickly produced, slow pans over whiteboards, candid shots of him coding with music swelling in the background. He narrated the story of his inspiration, how he'd labored for months to solve the toughest problems. It was a fiction told with the ease of someone who believed no one would question him. The video went viral within hours, flooding my feeds no matter how many times I muted it. I forced myself to watch it from beginning to end, my jaw locked so tight it ached. And then, at the very end, as the camera panned across his workspace, I saw it, my code, open on a monitor in the corner of the frame. Not a fragment, Not a coincidence. The exact variable names I'd invented, the same indentation quirks, the same comments in the margins, proof hiding in plain sight. I paused the video and stared at the frozen image. My pulse slowed, not from shock, but from the clarity that comes when anger and strategy finally align. He had left me a trail and I intended to follow it. The night I froze Ethan's behind-the-scenes video on that damning frame, I saved the still to 3 separate drives. Then I encrypted one copy and sent it to an anonymous Proton mail address, a contact I'd been holding in reserve for months. His name wasn't public, but his channel was notorious. A YouTuber who specialized in exposing stolen tech, using meticulous research and a knack for making corporate theft go viral. We spoke over an encrypted call. My voice was steady, even though my hands shook under the desk. I told him I didn't want to appear in his videos. Not yet. "I'll feed you evidence, all verifiable," I said. "You can run with it when the time's right." He agreed, almost too easily, and reminded me that timing was the only weapon that mattered in a story like this. That night I wrote in my journal, scrawling the words like I was speaking to someone unseen. If you were me, would you go public now, or wait for the moment when it could break him completely? I didn't know if the question was for my future self, for the YouTuber, or for the quiet audience in my head that had been following this mess since the start. 2 weeks later, Ethan called. "I've been thinking," he said, voice warm, casual. "You're wasting time in that cafe job. Why not come work for me, as my assistant? You know my workflow better than anyone." Every nerve in my body told me to hang up, but instead I smiled into the receiver. "Sure," I said. "I'd like that." I could almost hear his surprise through the static. "Great. I'll send you the onboarding paperwork." At his startup, I kept my head down, fetching coffee, handling meeting invites, answering the stream of investor emails that landed in his inbox. It was tedious work, but it gave me access. Slowly, I mapped his file system, noting where contracts were stored, which folders were password protected, which ones weren't. The jackpot came on a rainy Thursday when he stepped out for a call and left his laptop unlocked. In less than 2 minutes, I'd found the contract with the venture fund that had been backing his innovation. I copied it onto a secure drive. It detailed not just the funding terms, but a clause about intellectual property that could sink him if the truth came out. Meanwhile, the YouTuber and I built our quiet arsenal. Draft videos, annotated evidence, interviews with small developers whose ideas had been chewed up and spat out by bigger names. We agreed that when the trigger came, it would be more than just my story. It would be a pattern of theft that painted Ethan as the face of a larger problem. Still, I needed moments where my life wasn't just strategy and subterfuge. On Saturdays, I'd sit cross-legged on the carpet of my downstairs neighbor's apartment, teaching her 8-year-old son how to program a simple rescue robot using parts from a hobby kit. His laughter when the robot navigated its first obstacle course was like fresh air in my lungs. It reminded me that technology, at its best, was supposed to help people, not pad egos. Those afternoons were my reset button. No hidden cameras, no encrypted calls. Just a child grinning over blinking LEDs and a little plastic arm that could lift a toy block. But the quiet never lasted long. One Monday morning, while sorting through Ethan's incoming mail, I spotted an email from the funding agency. The subject line read, "Clarification required. Intellectual property rights." My pulse quickened. I opened it, scanning fast. They were asking for proof that all components of the AI project belonged to him, that no external contributors held rights. I copied the email to my secure folder before forwarding it to his assistant account. As I clicked the window closed, I caught my reflection in the black screen. Calm, composed, almost unrecognizable from the girl who had once frozen on the stairs, overhearing her parents' choice. The question now wasn't if Ethan's empire would crack. It was when, and whether I'd be the one holding the hammer when it happened. The family dining room was all polished wood and brittle smiles that night, a place where birthdays and holidays had been celebrated, now transformed into a stage. My parents sat side by side at the head of the table, Ethan to their right, and across from him, a man in a navy suit with the Quai's logo on his lapel. He was here ostensibly for an informal discussion. I placed a small USB drive in the center of the table, its silver casing catching the light from the chandelier. "This," I said evenly, "is the blockchain record of my AI's original build, time-stamped, immutable. It predates Ethan's first prototype by 6 months." Ethan leaned back in his chair, a faint smirk curling his lips. "Seriously, Lena? You're bringing tech jargon to a family dinner? This is embarrassing." "It's evidence," I replied. He gave a short, incredulous laugh. "Evidence of what? That you've been keeping tabs on me. You're my sister. Since when do you measure family in timestamps and code hashes?" His eyes flicked to the man in the suit. "She's making this personal. You know how siblings are." My mother's voice came sharp but controlled. "Lena, this is not the time to air grievances. Whatever you think happened, it can be resolved without spectacle." "This isn't spectacle," I said, keeping my tone level. "It's theft." Ethan's smirk faded just enough for me to notice. "Con gai trong, nhamakung tintoan voi an minsao." His voice was softer now, pitched like a private appeal, but the words were meant to cut. I looked from him to our parents, waiting for someone to acknowledge the weight of what I'd brought. Instead, my father folded his hands. "We can't afford public drama. Ethan's work, your work, if you contributed, represents the family. We need unity. That's more important than pride." The man from the Quai cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "We just need clarity on the origins, to keep our records clean." My mother nodded quickly. "See? No need for accusations. Lena, darling, let this go, for the sake of the family's image." It wasn't rage that moved me then. It was the clarity of finally understanding. I picked up my water glass, took a sip, and rose from my chair without another word. The USB remained where I'd placed it, a silent, gleaming dare in the center of the table. I walked out, my heels clicking against the hardwood, each step a small rebellion. The next morning, my company email access was gone. My login to the startup's cloud storage returned a permission denied screen. The office keycard failed at the door. Ethan had moved fast, but so had I. Every important file had already been duplicated, encrypted, and stored beyond his reach. That afternoon, the YouTuber dropped part 1 of his investigation. It was a 20-minute breakdown of Ethan's rise, featuring side-by-side comparisons of my early code commits with footage from Ethan's launch video. He didn't name me, but the overlap was unmistakable. The video racked up views by the thousands, the comments section filling with questions, doubts, and slow-building outrage. I didn't watch the whole thing right away. Instead, I found myself walking to the river that cut through the edge of town. The sun was low, painting the water in molten gold. I sat on the stone embankment, knees pulled up, and let the wind tangle my hair. It was there, in the hush between passing cars, that the memories came. A younger me, cornered by 2 girls in the schoolyard. Ethan stepping in, putting himself between us, telling them to back off. The way he'd walked me home that day, talking about comic books and pretending nothing had happened. The contrast was sharp enough to hurt. I couldn't reconcile that boy with the man who now stripped my work of my name. Part of me still wanted to believe he was protecting himself, not destroying me. A gull cried overhead, snapping the moment. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I expected a friend, maybe the YouTuber with an update. It was Ethan. If you keep going, I'll tell everyone your secret. I stared at the words until they blurred, the wind lifting strands of hair across my face. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I didn't type, not yet. Because the truth was, I already knew exactly what my next move would be. The message from Ethan lingered on my screen like a bruise. If you keep going, I'll tell everyone your secret. For 2 days, I didn't respond. I barely slept, haunted less by the threat itself than by the memories it carried. Mornings I couldn't get out of bed. Lectures I skipped until my attendance was a failing grade. The moment I withdrew from my courses and told no one but the registrar, I booked a therapy appointment that same week. The office smelled faintly of lavender, and the woman across from me had the kind of voice that invited truth. I told her about the fear, that my parents would never look at me the same way, that my name in the public eye would be stamped with shame before it was ever recognized for achievement. "Do you want to stop him, or do you want to keep the peace?" she asked gently. I stared at the carpet, tracing the weave with my eyes. If you had to choose between keeping your family or keeping justice, which would you pick? I thought the question was for me, but it was also for anyone who might someday hear my story. That night, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began recording. No scripts, no edits. Just me, speaking into the camera. I told the truth about the project, about Ethan, about the year I vanished from campus because depression had hollowed me out until I couldn't recognize myself. I talked about how the AI had started as a lifeline, a way to map distress calls because I knew what it was to send out silent signals and have no one answer. When I finished, I uploaded the video with the title, "My Brother's Threat," and the truth behind it. I went to bed without checking the numbers. By morning, it had 500,000 views. Comments poured in, some cruel, some kind, but most of them understanding. People wrote about their own breaks, their own returns. They called me brave, not broken. I knew then that Ethan's weapon had been blunted the moment I decided to pick it up myself. 2 days later, I dropped the rest of my evidence. A shared folder with time-stamped code, blockchain records, screenshots of the email where he'd submitted my proposal as his own. I tagged the Kiwi, the YouTuber, and every journalist who'd ever covered tech ethics. The internet did what it always does. It split in two. Some people called me a liar, an opportunist riding her brother's fame. Others saw the overlap in the code, the dates, the contracts, and called it what it was. The Kiwi released a brief statement. "We take allegations of intellectual property infringement seriously and will be initiating a formal investigation." While the storm gathered, I received a small package at my dorm. Inside was a handwritten letter from the leader of a volunteer rescue team overseas. They'd used the older public version of my AI to locate 3 people trapped under collapsed debris after an earthquake. "Your work saved lives," the letter read. "Even if no one knows your name, we do, and we thank you." I sat on my bed with the letter in my hands, the noise of the internet dimming for a moment. For the first time in months, I felt the simple grounding weight of why I had built the thing in the first place. It wasn't for recognition. It was for this. But reality returned quickly. The YouTuber messaged me. "Investigation's moving fast. might be your chance to separate your work from his for good. That evening, an email landed in my inbox from a law firm representing the QOI. The subject line was clean and direct. Meeting request. Confidential. The body of the message was just one line. We'd like to meet with you privately, without Ethan present. I read it twice, the words settling into place like the click of a lock opening. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning. The QI's press release was concise, almost clinical. Due to verified evidence of prior authorship and provenance, the disaster response AI project registered under Ethan Ward has been suspended. The original creator, Lena Ward, has been identified and acknowledged. It was the sentence I'd been working toward for months. Yet when I read it, I felt no surge of triumph, just a quiet exhale, as if I'd been holding my breath since the day I showed him my code. My parents didn't call to apologize. They didn't praise me either. But the next time I came home for dinner, there was no subtle shifting of resources toward Ethan, no loaded questions about why I wasn't more supportive. My mother asked if I wanted the last piece of pie. My father asked about my classes without comparing them to Ethan's projects. It wasn't love transformed, but it was a shift. 2 weeks later, I asked Ethan to meet me at a small coffee shop near the river. He arrived late, wearing the same guarded expression I'd seen in boardrooms and family photos. I suppose this is where you gloat, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. I shook my head. No, I'm not here to win. I leaned forward, choosing each word. You taught me something, even if you didn't mean to. You showed me how to live without waiting for someone else to give me permission. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or defiance wearing a softer mask. He stood without answering, leaving his coffee untouched. At the door, he hesitated, his hand on the frame. He glanced back, and for a heartbeat, his expression was unreadable, a mix of something that might have been pride or loss. Then he walked out into the street. With the case behind me, I turned my energy to building something new. I registered my own company, Cicada Systems, dedicated to AI tools for emergency response. From the first day, I wrote a clause into every contract. Contributors retained clear, documented rights to their work. A portion of the profits went into a fund for students defending their intellectual property, because I knew how lonely that fight could be. Months later, I stood backstage at a TEDx event, my hands cool despite the bright light spilling from the stage. When they called my name, I stepped into the beam and began my talk, not with the story of victory, but with the story of the long, uneven road to it. I spoke about mistakes, about the year I disappeared from campus, about the nights I almost gave up. I didn't frame it as a battle one, but as a map of how I'd learned to navigate my own life. The audience listened in stillness, not the charged silence of suspense, but the kind that comes from people leaning in. Near the end, I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. People ask if I wish the betrayal had never happened, I said, scanning the rows of faces. The truth is, it forced me to become the best version of myself. Not because of the pain, but because I chose what to build after. There was no dramatic swell of music when I finished, no confetti or standing ovation, just a wave of steady applause that grew into something warm and constant. As the lights dimmed and I stepped off stage, I caught myself glancing toward the back of the auditorium. The seats there were shadowed, indistinct. I couldn't say for certain, but for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing, hands in his pockets, watching. The house lights came up, the applause still echoing, and the shape was gone. Whether Ethan had been there or not, I didn't know. And maybe it didn't matter. The work ahead was mine to claim, and the future at last was wide open.